distinguished members of the panel, and all the students and viewers who have joined us across all the platforms, a very good evening to one and all. I am Vandana Yadav, student convener of Debate Society Campus Law Center. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you all to the 111th International Women's Day celebration. Happy Women's Day to everyone present here. This Women's Day is observed in recognition and celebration of all the exemplary women of India who have excelled and led their respective fields. Be it 𝐂𝐿𝐷 Chawla, first woman of Indian origin to go to space, or Ms. Shivangi Singh, country's first women Rafale fighter jet pilot, or Padma Shri awardee Tulsi Gaura ji, a tribal environmentalist. They all have scripted their success stories of excellence, overcoming all the challenges and hurdles which came across their way. Today, we have gathered here for this panel discussion. We call it CLC Town Hall, which has been organized to celebrate the spirit of feminism in India. I have this profound honor. It's my privilege to introduce you all with our esteemed panelists of this event. Thank you everyone for joining us here. So our first distinguished panelist is Senior Advocate Mr. 𝐕𝐢𝐤𝐺 Banerjee, Additional Solicitor General of India. Mr. Banerjee has formerly served as Advocate General of Nagaland. He had been a faculty member at various prestigious institutions, including IIM Calcutta. Moving towards our next panelist, we are joined by Ms. Seenu Joseph, author and co-founder, Mythri Speaks Trust. Her pioneering work in the field of menstrual health movement and issues related to women and children has been a source of inspiration for all of us. She has represented India in Global Conference on Menstrual Health in 2015 and has extensively researched on subjects like women and Sabrimala and Ritu. Now let me introduce with our third panelist and speaker, Ms. Zakia Suman. She is an activist, author and co-founder of Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan. She was the petitioner in the leading cases of Shaira Banu versus Union of India, Noor Jahan versus State of Maharashtra, popularly known as Triple Talaq case. I extend a very warm welcome to all the panel members. Thank you so much for joining us. Now I would request and invite our alumnus, Mr. Vijay Pujari, practicing advocate in Delhi and advisory member to Debate Society of Campus Law Center. He will be moderating today's session for us. Thank you, Vijay, for joining us. Now the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Vandana. Well, once again, welcome the distinguished panel, and with the due permission, would like to start today's town hall. The topic for the day is tracing the spirit of feminism, and in the interest of equality, it's only fair to start an event on feminism with a man, not just anyone, but a senior advocate and serving ASG of the Supreme Court of India. Sir, my first question to you would be, what is your idea of feminism? Where do you derive the idea of feminism from?
According to me, my idea of feminism, I sort of posit it in a cultural context. And, in my readings of where do I posit feminism, or my conception of feminism, there are two people whom I sort of take as starting points of that. One is, I don't know how many of you recollect, but in Bengal, we really look up to her sister Nivedita, or who is called Lokmata Nivedita. And her writings, and specifically her writings on civic nationalism and the position of women in that. And the other is the writings of Sarala Bala Devi Ghoshal. I don't know how many of you read, but it's very interesting because both of them come from a cultural nationalist context, and they interpret the modern world around it. In many ways, it's extreme. It grapples with the question of how to deal with tradition and modernity together. And I think in many ways, it's a starting point of a culturally contextualized women's empowerment, feminism movement. I'm reluctant to call it feminism as strictly as such. I know I'm going to be controversial because I think Lokmata Nivedita and Sarala Devi Ghoshal would be reluctant to term it, as in it's difficult to use Western terms to describe Indian realities across the board on various different issues, not only in relation to women's empowerment. That's where I come from.
Thank you, sir. Allow me to take this forward with Ms. Seenu Joseph. So, ma'am, sir does say that his idea of feminism is rather very Indic. So, what is your fundamental idea of feminism?
Namaste, and thank you for that question. Uh, I think that everyone here on this panel would agree that feminism is not in line with our cultural ethos, but we don't have another alternative to describe what we want to say. So I would like to begin by proposing that alternative term, and I would call it the feminine. So we are children of the feminine, and both male and female gender can have the quality of the feminine. That is what we refer to as Shakti. Shakti is the source of all creative energy, and Shakti is what we are all comprised of. So in our context, I think we should proactively change the language itself. We are not feminist, we are feminine. We are children of Devi. And why this distinction? Why is it important to make this distinction? If you look at the feminist movements, they are so opposing to our idea of the feminine because the feminist movement is rooted in this thought that women are by nature helpless. It is actually a very disempowering movement because you assume that somebody else has to give you your power. So you fight for your rights from men, from society, from government, because you assume that you are helpless. You cannot do anything for yourself. It is highly disempowering. And the feminine concept, the concept of Shakti, which is there in Sanatana Dharma, is the exact opposite. It talks about raising yourself above your challenges so that you can do things for others. You become empowered not by grabbing or asking or taking, but by giving. So the feminine was that quality of leadership which was based on your ability to give to others, to be nourishing, to take care of others. And there's no question of having to empower the feminine because who would dare empower Devi? That's how we thought of the feminine. And I think it's important that those of us who are connected to Sanatana Dharma start making this clear-cut distinction even in our conversation and talk about ourselves as the feminine rather than the feminist.
Thank you so much, and that's quite enlightening and deep. At the cost of sounding a little too repetitive, I'd like to put my next question and to Ms. Zakia Soman. I mean, who doesn't know Zakia Soman in the field of personal laws? Her contributions really changed the paradigm of personal laws in India. And ma'am, at the cost of sounding a little too repetitive, what is your idea of feminism?
Thank you. And thank you, the Debate Society, for having me. Thank you, Professor Seema Singh, for this. So I would continue what pretty much the earlier two friends have said, because I did not study the theory of feminism as such, and I did not know myself what feminism comprises. But I got introduced to feminism in a very organic way, in a very grounded manner, when poor women from the Muslim community, when they started saying that we want justice. If we want justice, we would not need charity. If we get justice as promised by the Constitution of India, we will not require any help. So that is when it started unfolding to me. And I realized that the average woman's desire to have a just and fair world, where she is not discriminated with on account of her gender, on account of her religion, on account of her caste, on account of her being from a poor or a economically deprived background, because she was a dropout at the level of 8-9 standard, she has faced discrimination throughout her life. So her desire to overcome that discrimination and demand justice and equality as promised by the Constitution of India and as promised by Allah. Because even Allah has created men and women equal. So this faith of the ordinary woman that I am an equal human being. I need dignity, I need respect, I need justice, and everybody needs to respect me and my humanity. That to me is how feminism, and that's how I got oriented into this whole, world of feminisms, and I realized that it has so much diversity, it has so much pluralism, and there is place for every view, and there is place for so much debate and discussion, and there is place for so much coming together and to build bridges across communities, across sections of society. And then I also recognize that at the heart of the Indian Constitution is that spirit that all human beings are equal. It recognizes, the diversity that is a large mass of human beings which comprises Indians, all of us. We may be in Kashmir, we may be in Kerala, we may be sitting in Manipur, we may be sitting in the run of Kutch, but we are all human. We are united by our humanity. We are united by our Indianness. We are united by the fact that we are all shared. We use this shared space, which is the planet. So to me, that is feminism. To how to take it forward, how to make it a better world, a fairer world, irrespective of gender, irrespective of caste, irrespective of religion, and irrespective of whether you are rich or poor, black and white. So it is. It's not.
Pardon, ma'am, there is an interruption.
Zakia, ma'am, there is some connectivity issue, I think.
Okay, while we get back Zakia ma'am on board again. So ma'am was actually talking, a large emphasis was on equality. So this allows me to push for the next question. This is to Vikramjit sir. Sir, you have an extraordinary practice in Supreme Court, and also your scholarship is very well known. So what do you think of using empowerment as means to equality, which is an end? And yes, sir.
No, my point is exactly what Sinu ma'am said, and I think that is absolutely correct. As in, equality in the way we term it in Western terms is a difficult thing to, therefore is difficult thing to achieve in the Indian context. Like it's always very difficult to use Western terms to describe Indian realities. And it's across the board. And I can, everywhere, therefore we grapple as lawyers, we grapple with it every day. And this has been narrated to me by a very eminent professor who studies Indian law at the University of London. We were discussing this when I was doing my graduation, met him discussing this. He says that the biggest problem in Indian law, and especially in Indian law solving social issues, is being able to describe Indian problems in English because there are no Indian equivalents. So he says the entire solution of the problem gets lost in translation. So in context of, especially in context of women's empowerment, and the word which Sinu ma'am used, I think is a wonderful word, is we can use the word Shakti, you can use feminine, you can use the word Shakti, but I think you need Indian terms to describe it. And it's not perfect equality because who can, as she rightly said, and Sister Nivedita says a number of times, that who can equate or come close to the power of the Devi. And, Sinu ma'am will know, Sister Nivedita actually dies with the name of Ma Kali on her lips in Darjeeling and of cholera. And she says this a number of times. So the most powerful force in the universe is Ma Kali, and then the Devi, and who can equal her with, be equal to her. But broadly, I think if you look at it in a social, economic, and Sister Nivedita also speaks about that in her civic nationalism in India, where she speaks about that. There is a requirement of, because of whatever has happened through custom, is to ensure that women in the modern age can also reach their full political, economic, and social development. And for that purpose, anything which helps them to reach that should be facilitated. Now, if as a person who sort of believes in the outlook of Swami Vivekananda, I would say it's largely incumbent upon the society to do that. But I assume that there may be possibilities of state intervention as well. But being a Vivekanandite, I would say that possibly, and what's also Sister Nivedita said, and what she tried to do in her life was to push this issue within society, so the society itself addresses this issue. And she sort of felt that the way it could be addressed is through education and through ensuring that the society itself addresses the inequities which are within it, rather than of state intervention. But of course, there has to be women, this Shakti has to be made Jagrit, for the want of a better word, and in some places where it is not so. I know it's contradictory. Again, it's using English terms to address Indian realities, which is very, very, very difficult.
Right. Thank you, sir. Building on inequality, we have a colleague of ours, 𝐂𝐲 𝐓𝐶, with a question to Seenu ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Vijay, for giving me the floor. It is very wonderful to host you again, ma'am. I hope you remember us from the Law and Spirituality Conference. So, ma'am, my question is that one of the most brutal consequences of gender inequality is in the form that we see is physical violence against women. And it is not just limited to backward and less developed nations or society. It is also very much prevalent in modern societies like United States of America. So this inequality is usually traced by people to the physical asymmetry of women and men. But what might be the psychological or social aspects and in fact behavioral and attitudinal factors which triggers this inequality all over the world alike?
That's a very complex question. And let me break it down into the few bits that I was able to understand. So one is, there is a premise, we are assuming that it is the fight for equality which is required. And so we assume that inequality is leading to violence against women. So that's the first part that we must understand. And the second part is, what is the root cause of violence against women? So far, we recognize it as social, behavioral, attitudinal causes. But are there biological bases for people, certain women especially, attracting violent nature, violent behavior into their spaces? And that is something I will elaborate and speak about. The first part, why do we assume that equality is the way to go about things, and that societies that are more equal, and we have often assumed that in the United States, they are far more gender equal than we are here in India, we assume that things are better there. So in America, the statistics in the American websites, this is what they say. 1 in every 6 American women has experienced rape. And 1 in every 33 American men have also experienced rape. 1 out of every 10 cases of rape are of men. Is this what we are aspiring for in the name of equality? See, if equality, the way the West understands it, has to happen, then either men should start menstruating or women should stop menstruating. That is the fact of the matter. We are talking about 2 species, parts of 2 species that are biologically unique on their own. How can we use this loose term like equality and then have the same rules for both? If you look at our Indian system, we had the Smrtis, Manu Smriti and the others, which spoke about specific rules for men and specific rules for women. These were not based on social conditions. These were based on a finer understanding of the biological difference of men and women. And I'll give you a few examples that will make this clearer. I spoke about how men should either menstruate, which we know isn't happening anytime soon. But it is happening that women's menstrual cycles are disrupting to such an extent that many of them no longer bleed normally. So what happens when their cycles are disrupted? One of the things that we've all seen around us is an increase in the male hormone called testosterone. And the condition that comes with it, which is PCOD, it has become increasingly common among working women world over. What causes it? Yesterday, I was just studying up the biological basis of these things, and one interesting study gave evidence of something that Ayurveda always knew and spoke about, and that is when women engage in behavior that is largely of the masculine sort, there is an increase in testosterone. What that means is when they are in fields of work that make them more competitive, make them more aggressive, that phase, in fact, the study actually showed that a game of chess increased the testosterone levels in women. Just a game of chess. We're not even talking about something that was physically, aggressive. Chess. Why? The spirit of competition. For that to play out, the body works out certain things internally. Your adrenaline rush happens. Testosterone is a hormone that gives you that aggressive, competitive edge. Now, typically, women have much lower concentration of testosterone than men because it's a male hormone. And if your ovaries are functioning well, it gets converted into the female hormone called estrogen. But what happens in this case is, because our cycles are so sensitive, even a slight increase in testosterone upsets our entire menstrual cycle. And that is why more and more women, in the pursuit of equality, are imitating male behavior. And we are losing the inherent femininity and becoming more masculine. That is what equality requires of us. This is something for us to know by observing ourselves and people around us. No woman who is aggressive by nature will have a smooth menstrual cycle. It's a given. Women's mental health and menstrual health are so closely linked, and women's overall health is so dependent on these sensitive menstrual cycles. Even in the corporate sphere, the simple thing of night shifts, even for men, it throws their entire natural rhythm out of balance. You have digestive issues. For women, when they do night shifts, it throws their menstrual cycles completely out of balance. If you do a sample study of working women who are in very competitive, aggressive, ambition-driven roles versus rural women who might be farm laborers, and just compare their overall menstrual and reproductive health, you will find that the rural women, even though they're doing more physically exerting work, have better menstrual health compared to the urban corporate women. Because the nature of the corporate work environment is about economic productivity. And economic success is considered as the ultimate aim of life. So women are having to prioritize that over their own inherent feminine quality. They feel guilty about motherhood. They frequently suppress their periods because it interferes with the work cycles, because our work cycles and our days off are created around the male form. Not that it is healthy for men, that's a different thing, but it's so much more damaging for women. In villages, even today, the entire farming community, if you look at it, they take a leave only when the women menstruate. Farming stops, everything stops. In Assam, we have the Ambubachi festival, where even today, all the shops and everything shut down because Mother Earth is considered as menstruating at that time. And women who are in sync with that cycle of Mother Nature will also menstruate at the same time. After I went to Kamakhya temple, for years, every time in that month, my period would sync with that of Ma Kamakhya. That's how delicate our cycles are and linked to nature's cycles. Which is why in ancient times, days off were not Sunday. How did the Sunday leave come in? That was introduced by the British in the late 1800s, because when they enacted the Factory Act, because our mills were producing much more than the London mills. And they would have to take Sundays off for the mass. The Christians go to church on Sundays. And whereas our people took time off during Amavasya, when women menstruated, all those festivals, and otherwise they worked throughout the week, because your body does not require a Sunday off. But your body does require off when all your hormones are at an all-time low. And women's bodies and their energies can influence that of the men around them, which is why men followed women's cycles. Even if you must talk of equality, it is healthier for the human species if men imitated and followed the cycles of women, rather than women trying to suppress their cycles and becoming like men. So in our context, even if we have to push for equality, it is good for both women and men to be in sync with the larger cycles of nature, which are reflected in women's bodies. That is the first thing. So please don't assume that the Western notion of equality and the lack of it is what leads to violence against women. That itself needs to be questioned and contemplated upon. The second part, what then is the cause for violence? I have worked as a counselor with the Women's Helpline for a couple of years, and we would, obviously, the cases that we got were all about domestic violence and all forms of abuse against women. There would be times when a woman would come in all beaten up, and we would look at her and assume that, yes, the way to go is the police and the legal route. So we'll say, okay, Domestic Violence Act, and let's file an FIR and all that. And then she would say, no, he's a nice person. We just want you to counsel him. Don't take any legal action. And then we would wonder what happened. Why is she saying that? When we would bring in the man, because we were a counseling center and you would listen to both sides, there were couples where when the man and the woman sit next to each other, without her even uttering a word, he would feel provoked to be violent towards her. And he would say that I don't want to be like this, but I don't know what it is about her that is making me behave in an aggressive manner. So what is actually going on here? I will tell you the biological basis of what happens. There is a portion of the brain called the amygdala. It is a small almond-shaped portion of the brain. This is the center that controls our fear and aggression impulses. So if we feel fear, the amygdala gets active and it makes you aggressive because you have to be able to counter the fear. And the amygdala acts on other parts of your body. So it acts on your sympathetic nervous system, which is what triggers your fight and flight response. It also alters your facial features. So if I'm sitting in front of you and I'm feeling fear, those of you looking at me, the amygdala in your brain will also trigger a fear response. So either you will attract more fear when you are fearful, or you will attract aggression as a result of countering that fear, because fear and aggression are two parts of the same coin. All those who are aggressive and violent by nature have an underlying quality of fear. It is the same amygdala which controls both. Now, we have this part of the brain that is about fear. Then we have the prefrontal cortex, which is your forehead region. That forehead region, the prefrontal cortex, its role is to help you have self-control, self-restraint, only if it is active. So there are studies which show that among serial murderers, among death row convicts, this prefrontal cortex region is not active enough. And that is why they are not able to control that impulse of aggression. And then there are studies which show that among those who practice yoga and meditation, the prefrontal cortex is a lot more active. Why? Because prana flows to this region. That is why we wear the kumkuma. That is what dhyana, pranayama, and all of that does. It increases the flow of prana in this region. And that is why those who practice that have much greater capacity for self-restraint. So when we see incidents of violence, there are two things we need to understand. Most of us respond with fear. We have to break that cycle. Fear attracts more fear, more aggression, more violence. When Nirbhaya incident happened, en masse, all of us were just projecting fear. And by doing that, we are attracting more and more violence. How do you break the cycle of fear? The best way is yoga, because that transforms your vibrational pattern. You see, fear is an emotion which has a very low vibrational frequency. And the thing with vibrations are that we will attract similar frequency vibrations from those around us. So the high frequency vibrations are of love, or of compassion, are of seva. So if you have to break the cycle of fear, you have to make yourself capable of operating in the higher vibrational zone of love and compassion, because of which automatically fear dispels. Now, as a woman, your biological cycles, the times just before you menstruate and during your period, are such that your vibrational frequency will naturally be low. And that is why we recommended menstrual seclusion and protection for women and all of that. So Manusmriti didn't say protect women because of some social issue of patriarchy. They said it because they understood this underlying biology of women. We operate in our reproductive phase, we operate from the lower vibrational frequencies because we need that region of the body to be functional. But in the process, we more easily tend to draw others with the same low frequency vibrations, which could create problems. So this underlying phenomena is the subtle reason why violence exists, and exists much more in societies where people practice fear, practice aggression, and we promote that. We are not able to break away from that. The earlier speaker spoke about Swami Vivekananda. You take any of these great people of Bharat, what was transformative about them? It was not always their speech. It was that they operated from these high vibrational frequencies, and simply being in their vicinity transformed you. You stopped feeling fear. So when I say that all of us have to become Shakti, that is what we have to do. We have to consciously operate from a space of high vibrational frequency so that we elevate those around us. And that is how we can end violence. I've just touched upon the basics of this. It's a very deep and vast subject, but just to give you a glimpse of how we can understand this through our own Bharatiya Jnana Parampara in a way that the West has not even scratched the surface of.
I am really awestruck with the topics that we have touched. We have touched metaphysics, we have touched criminal jurisprudence, we have touched almost everything under the sun over here. Ma'am, you have spoken extensively on menstruation, and I have Yakshna Sharma coming in with a question, very pertinent question on menstruation itself. That is for you, ma'am.
Your book on Ritu Vidya, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Your book,
Yes,
your book Ritu Vidya talks about embracing femininity and aspects associated with it. My first question is, should we initiate a research on how menstrual blood has healing properties, since it has nutrition that is used to nurture the fetus? And my second question is that what can we as an organization, as a debating society only, as an organization, do to incorporate and make the most use of menstruation and to embrace the blessing that it is?
Thank you for those questions. Well, the first part about the research, it already exists, and you can look it up under the heading of stem cells and menstrual blood banking. This was something that got popular a few years ago because we have heard about banking the umbilical cord, because that also has stem cells. But you can only bank that when a woman gives birth, right? The umbilical cord is available only then. But menstrual blood is something available month after month. And the reason it is so important is because, as you said, it has highly regenerative properties, the stem cells of menstrual blood. And there was a lot of conversation about banking women's menstrual blood and having research that can use it to cure various diseases, Parkinson's, cancer, even if you have to do an organ transplant, if you have the stem cells and those who are related to you by blood, it might provide matching stem cells. So there were a lot of conversations about this. It never really took off because of the difficulties of storage of stem cells. So that was a more practical thing, but there is existing research in that. So in our ancient systems, we understood this in a very different way. Menstrual blood contains the egg that is released, and within the body, prana is most concentrated in the human seed, in the sperm in men and in the egg in women. So when the egg is released through the menstrual blood, that contains copious amounts of prana. And that is why it was considered as very pure and very good. So that was the cultural way in which we understood. The second part of your question, without taking too much time, I will simply say this. If you want to do something as an organization, start allowing women to take a menstrual leave. Take a menstrual leave. We do not need Sundays off. It will not affect productivity because 2 or 3 days of menstrual leave, if you feel that, productive hours are going away, then work on Sundays. Biologically, you don't need a Sunday off, but you do need the time off when you have your period. And when you do take that rest, menstrual rest, you come back in a much more productive and healthy way. And the next step would be to have men imitate the cycles of the women in their lives. It would be a lot more easier and healthier for them as well, because they would be influenced by the cycles of the women they are around. Also, when we menstruate, we lose prana. And when we lose prana, we tend to absorb it from our surroundings. So if there are people around us, and if you observe closely, the men especially would feel more irritated around menstruating women. They would feel more drained out. They would feel more tired, because a menstruating woman will tend to draw prana from whoever is around her to herself. That is an added reason why menstrual seclusion used to be practiced. The modern science equivalent of this understanding is oxidative stress. Menstruation is a time when your body goes through oxidative stress. And when it goes through oxidative stress, it tries to make up for it by borrowing electrons from the nearby bodies. So we are literally sucking electrons from those around us, men or women, who are not menstruating. And then their bodies go through oxidative stress. So these things have to be understood. If you want to create workspaces that are in tune with our body's rhythms, then going for a menstrual leave is the first and the most sensible thing to at least offer women as an option. If you don't mandate it, it's fine, but at least give women that option. That's my bit.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, divulging a little from the topic, I have next question for Zakia, ma'am, if she's present.
Yeah, I'm here, Vijay.
Yes, ma'am. My question would be, what are the discerning elements of intersectional feminism in a Muslim household, and how different are they from that of a non-Muslim household?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very, very vast topic, but since we are all talking in the constitutional and the citizenship framework, so I would, sort of limit myself to that, and that would make more sense to everybody, I guess. So one of the areas which have been reformed, pertaining to justice for women, has been the whole arena of family laws. So as we all know, after we got independence and the parliament was formed, a lot of progressive laws giving justice and equality to women were brought about. And one whole realm was reform of the family laws. And that is how the laws pertaining to marriage, giving rights to Hindu women in marriage, giving, for instance, the right to divorce was granted by the Hindu Marriage Act. The right to share in property, parental property, was given by Hindu Succession Act. Likewise, 8-9 laws were brought about, which gave Hindu women a lot of rights within family, within the household, keeping in line with the religious texts, and also keeping in mind the entire focus which was about affirmative action, about getting women citizens on an equal platform. But similar kind of reform did not happen pertaining to the Muslim community. As a result, we are still ruled by what is known as the Shariat Application Act of the 1937. So if we look at that act, because we are all law students, we can just, it's a short and very simple act. It doesn't contain answers to any of the issues such as age of marriage, such as method of divorce, such as consent in marriage, such as the issue of polygamy, such as the issue of guardianship and custody of children, even the share in property and inheritance, the rights which have been granted by the Holy Quran have not been included in this law. So there is a legal disparity in the Muslim household. If we compare a Muslim household with any other household in India, say a Christian household or a Hindu household, or even a Sikh household, then this disparity is there because it's a major anomaly in the arena of family and marriage. And we all know that in the lives of Indian women, marriage is very, very important part of their lives. And most women who enter into matrimony are deprived of their rights because of the absence of a codified law. The benefit which was given to our sisters from the Hindu community or even the Christian community, those benefits have not come to us. So in that sense, it is a legal disparity which leads to also social disparity. So the whole movement against triple talaq, which was initiated by the Muslim women themselves, is one of the landmark in this whole struggle for justice and equality within the Muslim marriage. And it's also sort of counting upon all the gender justice injunctions within the Quran. Because there are so many Muslim countries where there are well laid out rules of age of marriage, where there are well laid out procedures of divorce. It will be surprising to most, that even in our neighboring Pakistan and Bangladesh, there are well laid out and codified Muslim family laws based on the Quran. And some of the North African countries, some of the Arab countries have, such progressive legislation. So if we talk about the patriarchy within the Muslim household, then this is a big, big anomaly between a Hindu sister or a Christian sister and a Muslim sister. So this is what I would like to, at this stage highlight, Vijay. And this is what we want to change so badly, because we want parity with all other sisters, and we want that there should be a codified Muslim family law based on the Quran and conforming to the principles of the Constitution, which should be passed by the Parliament. Because even some years ago, even the Christian women did not have a right to divorce, which has now become possible, I think, beginning 2002, where thanks to an amendment brought about by the Parliament, that they can go under the Indian Divorce Act, and there are a lot of Christian women, if they want, they can get the divorce. Similarly, of course, our Hindu sisters have got the right to divorce under the Hindu Marriage Act. So yeah, in that sense, there is a great lacuna, there's a big gap, which should be addressed, is what we feel. Over to you, Vijay.
Yeah. Indeed, very true, ma'am, very true. Ma'am, we have Sneha coming up with one of the most relevant questions of the sessions, ma'am, and I hope you find it good. Sneha?
Yes, good evening, ma'am. My question to you is, do you think that the concept of personal choice is merely an illusion in the context of the hijab? And if yes, from a feminist perspective, should the use of the hijab be merely discouraged, or would the ideal end goal be the complete discontinuation of the use of the hijab? And my second question is with respect to the recent events and cases, how do you see the status of a Muslim woman with respect to their rights in our country?
Yes, Neha. So again, it's a very important question, because it addresses a kind of a impasse, which has been generated over the hijab question, recently in Karnataka. So there are 3 or 4 dimensions to this, and I'm sure as law students you would appreciate all the dimensions, and you will also accept that they are all equally important. So first and foremost, hijab is not an essential practice of Islam. So we have to keep that in mind, because hijab is a recent entrant to India. It has arrived in India only in the last maybe about two or three decades. And I would even go to the extent of saying, and I'm saying this based on a lot of evidence and a lot of research which has been done by Islamic scholars, spread in different parts of the world. Not just the hijab, even the veil is not essential to Islam. It is a patriarchal imposition. If we actually, strictly read the religious text, with a human rights and humanistic and feministic perspective, then it was a word. The word was used in the context of like a wall or a barrier or a division, and in most contexts it was a male context, because it was a male milu in the time of the Prophet. So after the Prophet was no more, it very soon got translated into a very, very patriarchal meaning. It got translated as veil for the women, where it became mandatory to put women behind the veil and confine them in the 4 walls of home, because it was a male-dominated social order. The way of thinking was very, very male-centric, and also, I would say, misogynist. So that persisted over the centuries, and there is enough evidence, as I said now, that it is not at all an essential practice of Islam. In fact, far from it. So that is the first part. Second part, I feel what has happened in Karnataka was very well addressable locally. It could have been resolved amicably by dialogue between the college institution, the principal, the faculties, the teachers, and the parents. These kind of situations arise normally, and they are resolved normally through dialogue and through discussion. A bit of give and take, bit of adjustment. Some adjustment could have been made, that where there are male teachers, maybe because it's a girls' college in any case. So it could have been worked out. I feel it was unnecessarily politicized, and it got exploded into this kind of a Hindu-Muslim war, which is totally wrong. That is the second dimension. The third dimension is, I also feel that the girl's choice is important, because for the girl to understand that this is a patriarchal imposition, she needs to go through that whole journey of empowerment, through that whole journey which can come about hopefully through education. When she will understand someday, when she will read the text for herself, when she will really, understand the religion for herself, without the male patriarchal intermediaries, when she will understand, this is not essential to my religion. But for that to happen, so many things have to fall together. Till then, she is given to understand that this is what your religion demands, and this is what she's sticking to. So otherwise, also there is this whole choice argument, which is allowed. Our constitution allows us to dress as per our own preferences, even as we are all required to obey the uniform regulations, uniform rules and regulations. So maybe there can be a head covering which will be the same color as the uniform or something like that. Like I said, that there could have been some middle path which could have been worked out. This kind of, I was very really disturbed and, shocked to see those videos, where, young people, boys and girls, boys in saffron scarves and this girl in hijab, and, they are like, as though we are at some kind of a war. This is just not acceptable. So I feel that it is a matter which on which all sides should reflect very deeply. And we should think about the right to education, especially when it comes to our daughters. The right to education is the most important right, and girls should be in school, hijab or no hijab. And all of us who are, we are not, those are 17, 18-year-old girls, but we are parents, we are teachers, we are the educationists, we are the civil society members. We can show that kind of a maturity and that kind of a spirit of dialogue, and we can all exhibit that kind of kindness and compassion which is also the spirit of our constitution, and not allow these kind of extreme binaries and extreme arguments on all kinds, on all sides, which is not good for our society. It cannot be good for our society. It cannot be good for our country. So I feel very strongly about this issue, Sneha, and thanks that you brought it up. I think I should stop here, otherwise I'll go on and on.
Extreme binaries are perhaps never good, ma'am. The next question is to Vikramjit sir, and Avantika would be asking.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. My question to you is that how can judiciary step in the evolution of jurisprudence in our country while dealing with crimes related to women? For example, constructive interpretation of courts, like taking account of mental background of women, like battered women syndrome, etc., while dealing with women with the course of action?
See, I think the whole question is, most of the time, when the judiciary is asked to address these questions, the judiciary always interprets them in context. And in any issue, especially in such social legislation, I'm sure you're lawyers, you are educated as law students and halfway there. So you would know that the judiciary usually takes a holistic sort of interpretation as to the provisions. So I think, whatever, these are examples as to whether the mental background, mental health, or the mental status of the person concerned should be taken into account. That would depend upon, as we all know as lawyers, on the context in which the case arises. There would be certain contexts in which I'm sure that can be taken into account, and there will be some contexts when it wouldn't be too relevant. But like every case is a case by case, is to be decided on a case by case basis. So, but I think overall there should be a holistic interpretation of any social welfare legislation, including legislation which protect the rights of women. So I don't think there's anything incorrect what the judiciary does, and the judiciary does it consistently.
Right, sir. So we have another question for you coming from Shishir Rai. Shishir.
Hi, Shishir.
Thank you, Vijay. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to put forward the question. So again, I'm afraid that my understanding of feminism comes from a Western perspective, but there has been a critique of the feminist movement, at least in the West, that it has moved from what it has started, that equality of opportunity, that the women should be allowed to do what they want to do because they are humans as much as men. But it has moved from that to equality of outcome. It is only focusing now on how many women are within a particular organization or how many number of hours they're working on. And this is distorting what is the real situation is on the ground. And this is not putting up what is actually happening on the ground and not elaborating like what is the real problem that is going on with the women. So my question is a two-parter. First is, how much do you agree with this view and what is your opinion on this criticism? The second, do you think that there might be a need to reorient these feminist movement goals, so in order to make it more expansive in nature, both in respect of for the women and also to ensure that in various cultural societies it could be taken up more easily and could be permeated more easily? Because at the end of the day, as it has been said, it is more of a Western perspective and not a cultural perspective of feminism.
Okay, I'll address this question in very short terms. I think this question of where the well springs of women's empowerment comes from in India is a debate which goes at the very root of what sort of model to adopt for the want of a better word, and I'm using it approximately, women's empowerment in India. And that is why, my exploration as to Sister Nivedita and Sarla Devi Ghoshal is exactly on that point. Because the entire argument, which I think Sister Nivedita brings forward, is a very interesting argument. She says that Indian society has different ideals, is based on different structures, and Western, for the want of a women's empowerment, she uses the word feminism once in a while, talks about the individuals. So there has to be a balance. And in many cases, this question of, I think, substantive and procedural and, the first wave, second wave, third wave, these are in many ways Western concepts. And I'm not even sure it's applicable in cities in India. We have different issues and it has to be addressed differently. I am not saying we live in a perfect society. I don't think any society is perfect. But they have to be addressed from an Indian perspective. I am not a person who says everything in tradition is good. I said if the tradition does not stand the test of times or the rationality, it may have to be discarded. But it's important. It is extremely important that we come out of a strictly Western interpretation of any sort of ideology, because it doesn't really work on the ground. In India, we have different issues. It needs to be addressed differently. And, when we were young, when we started off studying feminism in law school, and we were taught feminism in law school, we were sensitized to it at the National Law School, we were told that there was an Indian feminism. And it was distinct. But, as I grow older and as I see the debates which are happening right now, it almost seems that we reflect, maybe because of Twitter, maybe because of social media, maybe because of 30 other things, we almost reflect the reality of Western living in our lives. That does not work. That's a recipe for complete disjunction and the recipe for disaster. I am not to be construed as saying that there is nothing to be corrected. There are things to be addressed. And everything is not glory and hunky-dory in the past. Things have to be changed. Things have to be addressed. And, we have to do it in a constructive manner, which takes into account culture is a strong word. Religion, again, is a Western term. Culture is a Western term. These are all approximations of where we are. We try to describe reality. But it has to come from an Indic conception of the world. And for our laws to be more effective, whether it be judge-made laws or whether it be statutory laws, we'll have to start addressing these issues front and proper.
Thank you, sir. The next question, we slightly diverge from this topic and go to the fundamentals of the feminist educations. That is, how empowered and how educated are our masses? The grassroots level education about feminism and equal rights, gender studies. We have Vakula Giri coming in with a question to Seenu ma'am. Vakula.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. Given that the formative years of a child are instrumental in the development of their personality, what do you think is the ideal age for a child to know about the biological as well as psychological differences that exist between the two genders? Do you think introducing an entire subject on gender equality as a part of the school curriculum, as a lot of people have proposed, can help in addressing these deep-rooted gender disparities that children tend to consciously and unconsciously internalize in school?
Okay. The first question, what is the right age to talk to children about sexuality? I don't think we should define it by a single age. It is the right time whenever that particular child has a question. So I would do sessions for parents on recognizing and preventing abuse, sexual abuse for children. And parents would ask questions when their 6-year-old would suddenly hear somewhere and come and ask them, how was I born? And then they're not able to answer. So they just, change the topic and talk about something else. And then they would ask, is 6 the right age to talk about it? Well, the right time is when the child has a question, because that is when they're curious and they're open to learning. Now, we as parents or as teachers or as simply elders in society need to equip ourselves to be able to give age appropriate answers. So it's wrong to just see, we live in this world where the current framework necessitates standardizing everything. And that simply cannot work because every individual is different. Every child's circumstance is different. Sometimes a child might be asking out of curiosity because they've heard this question from a friend. At other times, the child could be asking because of an incident which might have been the initial stages of attempts of sexual abuse. So as parents, as caretakers, as elders, we need to equip ourselves to handle whatever questions that come at whatever age and not run away from it. The unhealthy relationships happen when parents don't respond to these in the way that they should and try to avoid the questions altogether. Then the child seeks other ways of learning, which may not be healthy at all. And that's the real danger. I don't know if you heard my initial part of the talk about the question and the word equality itself. If you did, you perhaps would not have asked that question of whether we need to teach children about gender equality. I think we need to teach children what is unique about each gender biologically. Because we are creatures of biology. If we have a physical form, we have a biology, and everything else, our behavior, our thought process, our interactions with the opposite gender, the way we interact with the world, it is rooted in our biology. Why is it that the West does not give importance to biology? And why are we always assuming social constructs? Because then it is easier to manipulate people. If we say that it is all about social conditioning, we can socially condition and engineer personalities the way we want. In our country, in the Bharatiya tradition, the basis of every understanding was biology. We taught children the differences in biology, and we taught them how the feminine and the masculine play out in your personalities, in your lives, and how to bring in that harmony. We did not talk about social conditioning. We never said that everyone has to behave the same way. We never thought that everyone is the same. That is the truth of it. When you give people the fundamental understanding of the biological basis rooted in your sukshma sharira, that is your subtle anatomy, then you give them the freedom of making choices because they truly understand where they come from. When you tell people that everything is just social conditioning, you leave children and society open to be manipulated, and we are all products of that manipulation. That is why we so easily believe when someone dismisses Manusmriti or says things, uses words like patriarchy, Brahmanical patriarchy, all of that. We so easily believe because we've all been conditioned, we've all been socially engineered. We have not understood the basis of our existence and behavior is rooted in our biology, which is what the Bharatiya Parampara did. And when we were colonized, that is the first thing that they destroyed. They called our sciences as pseudoscience because our sciences was rooted in this fundamental understanding of human form. Varnas, everything is rooted in the biology of it. The rules for women are rooted in the understanding of our biology. The rules for men, all the sadhana that they required, it is rooted in the understanding of their biology. We said that's not relevant, and we destroyed our entire people's ability to think for themselves. And now again, we are using that same framework and trying to just brush it and polish it. It's not going to help. Not going to help.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question is to Zakia, ma'am. Ma'am, in the times where interfaith marriages are denounced and considered an irreconcilable sin, can the state reinforce the Special Marriages Act?
Vijay, there is some issue with your connectivity.
My connectivity, ma'am?
Yeah,
Rakia ma'am, have you heard the question?
I heard the first part.
Ma'am, I'll repeat it, ma'am. So sorry. In the times where interfaith marriages are considered an irreconcilable sin, can there anything to reinforce?
No, so
Vijay, please you switch off your camera and then ask. There is some connectivity issue on your part.
Am I audible?
No. Your voice is breaking.
Okay. Is it better now, ma'am?
Yeah, it's
Any
better. Better.
Yes. In the times where interfaith marriages are denounced and considered an irreconcilable sin, can the state do anything to reinforce the Special Marriages Act?
Yeah, perhaps because it's a Special Marriages Act is an act which is lying hardly used. There is very little awareness about it. So there's a concrete program which needs to be undertaken, because for all practical purposes it's a common law for all, right? It's not just meant for interfaith marriages alone. Even two Hindus can go and marry under the Special Marriage Act. Two Muslims can also go and register their marriage under the Special Marriages Act. So I feel that this law is a very, very important law for our society, and it needs to be strengthened. So it has certain aspects are missing which needs which need to be brought in there. It needs to be enhanced, and it needs to be popularized, so that more and more girls become educated, more and more girls become aware of their rights, demand equality in marriage and in marriage relationships also. So I think it's a good instrument, jurisprudence which already exists in our system, which is lying somewhat, or rather too much underused, I feel. So it can be popularized, it can be brought into the public consciousness, basically. Yes, I feel it should be done.
Yes, ma'am. We are going to the final.
Yeah, again, you are not audible.
Ma'am, it is Siddhita with the next question to 𝐕𝐢𝐺𝐻𝐻 sir.
Good evening, everyone. My question is to 𝐕𝐢𝐺𝐻𝐻 sir. Sir, under the Central Civil Services Leave Rules 1972, male government employees are entitled to only 15 days of paternity leave before or within 6 months of delivery. Thus, the Indian paternity leave law is restrictive in terms of eligibility and appears to be based on the concept that caring for a child is essentially the job of the mother only. So, sir, how can this dogmatic notion about fatherhood be changed, and how can law and paternal policy making in context of paternal leave help to overcome the stereotypical role of men in domestic household?
Okay, I'll answer that question. I think a lot of it flows from what Sinu ma'am has said, and I see the whole concept is a lot of our laws do have come from, the want of a better word, from a colonization background, from has its origins in Factories Act and etc. It's a long story, and you want me to take you on to that? That's a long story. It's a talk in itself as to how the product of the entire legal system is a product of, in many ways, a product of colonial economics, colonial politics, and colonial sociology. There are unevenness in the laws. In short, they have to be sorted out. But the question is, how do you sort it out? Because the world we live in today works. Number one, there are various different pulls and pressures which exist in the world today. One is, of course, society. The second, and very importantly, is economics. And there are various different commercial interests. So, everything plays out in the public sphere now. So, ideally speaking, there should be a balanced approach. But then a balanced approach in the world as we exist today, not in an ideal world, will have to take into account various different arguments. And there are arguments like you can't allow a person to spend so much time out of work, he has to be productive, he has to be involved in work. That's an argument. I'm not saying good, bad, valid argument, but that's an argument. So this question of balancing is something which needs to be worked out. And as we know that, for a perfect legislation, there requires to be consultation of all sides. Is any law perfect? I don't think any law is perfect. I think every law can always change for the better.
Thank you, sir.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, Vijay, you are audible.
Yes, ma'am. It's Toshita with the next question, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone.
To Seenu, ma'am.
My question is that pink tax is a gender-based pricing referring to the extra cost on products which are specifically designed and marketed for women, which deepens the gender divide and creates a particular standard of beauty. So how can we overcome these practices which have been normalized by us and create awareness about them?
Could you repeat the question? What is that you started with?
Ma'am, I started with pink tax, which is a gender-based pricing referring to extra cost on products.
Okay. All right. I wasn't aware of such a thing. But one thing I will tell you that I have noticed increasingly, as women are gaining financial independence, they are becoming more materialistic in a way that was never natural for the feminine. The feminine was never about hoarding, was never about covering yourself with things that you don't need. The feminine quality was always about giving to others, taking care of others' needs. And when women would come in the possession of some sort of finances, it was so natural for her to do it, to give it away as seva. So here again, I would request that we go a little deeper into this whole idea of women spending so much money on keeping up an idea of what makes them beautiful or acceptable. The whole narrative of self-indulgence is extremely harmful, not just for the woman, but for society as whole. See, earlier women had this, when they would become mothers, there was a natural attachment to the child. And in that process of motherhood, she developed a natural vairagya towards all things material, because it opened up certain dimensions in her that were not existent, and she just became a mother to all. Even today, in our traditional languages, they still refer to women who have become a mother, even though they are very young, they call them Mataji or they call them Amma. Because that dimension was appreciated, and it just, those qualities enhanced her beauty from within. In our tradition, how do we understand beauty? Beauty was always associated with what is reflected from within. We called it Aishwaryam. When we would see someone who was the dharmic way of good looking, we would say, oh, what an Aishwaryam in her face. What tejas in his eyes. That's what we refer to as beauty. It had nothing to do with the external, and everything to do with the inner quality of prana and how that reflected, that glow reflected in your face. So now we've gone so far away from that, and we become so obsessed with, again, non-Indic perceptions of beauty that I don't know where to start this conversation. And we are assuming that some things are fine. Okay, it's all right for women to spend on these products, but pink tax, well, let's question just that. I think we have to dig a lot more deeper. What exactly is beauty? What exactly is appealing? We have to start from that. You know, the clothing that we developed in India, there's so much science to that. You know why we wear the sari as we do? Why the dhoti was worn as it was as a traditional attire? Why was it done that way? And traditionally, both men and women wore the lower part of the garment the same way, the panchakacham style. It was like a dhoti for women also. This form of a sari is because of the Victorian influence. This is not how the sari was originally worn, the lower part at least. But even today, when we go to South Indian temples, for example, they insist that women should wear a sari and men should wear only the lower garment, and upper is just the uttariyam. It's just a piece of cloth, unstitched cloth. Why? The way the sari and the dhoti is tied, it goes in sync with the flow of prana, both in the lower half of your body and upper half. And you always expose the navel region because there are marma points in that region from where there are nadis that originate and carry prana to all parts of your body. So when you expose the navel region to the solar energy, and when you go to a temple, when you receive prana from there, the best point to receive it is the navel. And that is why our traditional garments expose that region. And that is the only region that you need to keep open to receive both the sun's energy, your solar plexus is in that region, and the prana from temples. And our garments were designed in such a way because for us, beauty meant that your inner workings, your sukshma sharira, there's prana flowing in all your organs. You're well nourished with that. There is a natural glow in your face because of that. You're healthy because of that. And how do you facilitate that? And that inner health, when that reflects in your face, we call that beauty. Even kajal was not for cosmetic purposes. The way it was prepared and it was worn under the eye, that was to reduce the keep pitta in check. There is a form of pitta that operates in the region of the eye. And because we are a country that tends to get very hot, applying kajal will keep that pitta cool. Henna was also for the same purpose. It has a cooling property. So even our ideas of beauty were never just for the heck of it. It was so rooted in our biological basis. And we need to somewhere go back to that. You know, I've done some work with women who are victims of acid violence. And that completely transformed my idea of beauty itself. Because these were women, for no fault of their own, had acid thrown on their face and completely disfigured. Their ear was melted, their nose was melted. And there was one particular woman, when we asked her how we can help her, her simple reply was that when she wants to board a bus, the conductor does not stop because people get afraid looking at her. How do we create a society where she can live? Don't each of us have a responsibility to project ourselves without makeup, without these external enhancements, so that those who might be disfigured, those who might have problems will not have so much difficulty being accepted in society? That was almost a turning point for me to decide not to use makeup and not to focus so much on external beauty, to make it easier for women to live. We've set such horribly artificial standards of beauty. It's affecting every one of us. It's affecting the men, it's affecting the women. It's not real. So dig deeper. Don't just limit it to the question of this tax and that. That framework on which this rests itself needs to be thought about again. Right? I don't think I've given you the answer you were looking for, but I'm incapable of that, I realize.
No, thanks for answering my question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This perhaps is the last question, and rightly so. This is directed to Zakia, ma'am. Ma'am, are you in favor of personal laws being amended to a common minimum standard, or do you profess a major overhaul going forward? I am referring to a UCC, perhaps.
Yeah. So the purpose here is gender justice, and the purpose here is also to make it available to all Indian women, irrespective of what faith background they come from. So that was the conception behind the UCC, at the time of independence. And it was thought that maybe because of the male domination in our society, the equal rights given to women will not translate into reality. So it's better that there is a legal framework which is an enabling framework. That was the thinking at that time. But over the period and now, it has become a hugely politicized issue. So I feel that the starting point should be, holding a dialogue, with all the stakeholders about what are the disparities in the existing legal frameworks pertaining to different, because in our country, thanks to the constitutional scheme of things, when it comes to laws in marriage and family, they are all based on the religious texts. And like I said earlier, there's a huge gap in terms of the Muslim family law not being codified. So there has to be, that kind of a stakeholder consultation, a lot of education, a lot of awareness, a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion needs to happen. Because one example which comes to mind, we all saw what happened over the farm laws, right? So it can lead to that kind of an imbroglio unless it is handled very sensitively and in a manner in which, now it has been more than 7 decades to our independence, and this has been a long pending injustice. So like I said, that ideally it would be that the Muslim sisters are also granted parity by the parliament, passing a codified Muslim family law and referring to all those issues that I mentioned at that time, including consent in marriage, age of marriage, method of divorce, polygamy being strictly illegal, practices like halala being strictly illegal, giving guardianship and custody of children to both father as well as mother, depending on the best interest of the child, which is the existing jurisprudence, giving share to women in property, registration of marriages. So all these are the issues which Muslim women are facing day in and day out. So this whole matter has to be handled with a lot of empathy and with a lot of sensitivity. Otherwise, it can, it will get like the incident over hijab has just demonstrated for all of us. It can completely get politicized and the whole thing can go for a toss. So it has to be a lot of process of dialogue and deliberation. But if we go by the opinion of the Law Commission of India, I think if I'm not wrong, it was the latest one was the 11th Law Commission of India. So they are also of the similar view, what I'm saying. They're saying that kind of a milieu doesn't exist, and a common law will not be received well. It will not be able to address the kind of gaps that we intend to address. So I guess it calls for more work by all stakeholders and in so many directions, basically. Yes. Over to you, Vijay.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That actually marks the end of the town hall. And I would like to call the reason behind this entire event, Dr. Seema Singh, without whose initiation this thing wouldn't really pass the notice board. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hand it over to Dr. Singh.
Thank you so much, Vijay. And very honestly, when we were contemplating about this program, so many things were running into my mind, and I just went and checked the theme of this year Women's Day, and the theme was gender equality today for sustainable tomorrow. And when I started reading the history, I came to know that for the first time it was celebrated in the year 1909. So from 1909 to 2022, still the same thing is there, and that is the gender equality. So, I am very thankful because this was a very insightful session, and I wanted to bring out certain things from the experience and the knowledge of all the three speakers. And I personally believe it came out very brilliantly because once I decided to pick this topic, tracing the spirit of the feminism, I wanted to create a new discourse, a new narrative, which was basically based upon the femininity about which the senior Joseph ma'am is talking about. It is very right. We all are mutually agree, I think, and I don't think that there is any confusion that the biggest problem which India is facing presently is we are going to follow the concept of the Western feminist jurisprudence, but the circumstances in which this jurisprudence evolved in the Western world was entirely different than the Indian circumstances. There women were discriminated, and the main reason of evolving this concept of feminist movement was they believed that all the legislations and all the even the religious scriptures, they were interpreted by male with a patriarchal mindset, where they always treated as a second class citizen. And that's why till 20th century they are fighting for the very basic right, like right to vote and right to equality, right to property. They wanted right to get education and get equal opportunity. But their fight was very much different from the fight of the Indian women, as Seenu Joseph ma'am has very rightly said. And the same thing was said by Vikramjit Banerjee sir when he is talking about Bhagini Nivedita. In India is the first country, I think, in the entire world where the feminist movement was initiated by men. And जैसे अभी शीनू जोसेफ मैम ने बोला, you are going to compare two things and you don't know that what to compare. So gender equality, I have heard this term, we all have heard this term because this is very frequently discussed term, but I have never seen anybody define it appropriately that what is the meaning of gender equality. So most of the time we are trying to copy each other's role. I don't think that this is gender equality because it is not copying. We are unique in our own natural way. And Seenu Joseph ma'am brilliantly explained the difference of, physical differences and the science which basically works within this physiology of male and female body. Zakia Suman ma'am, because I was also reading some text from the the women who were fighting for the rights of the Muslim in different Islamic countries. So, I have seen that the entire world is divided into different parts, and the struggle for the women in all the three parts, one is the Western world, one is the Islamic world, and one is the country like India. And definitely there are fights, and the reason of the level of the fight may be different. In every part of the world, the women is going to fight for the right to equality. But the important thing is to understand equality in the correct sense. Seenu Joseph ma'am has raised a very important point because, yes, in the American Western world, everything is connected with money. So I was just going through a data and I came to know that for them producing a baby and producing a product doesn't make a difference. So that's why one girl student, when she asked a question to Vikramjit Banerjee sir, that why only 15 days leave for the male or for the father. So remember, even in the Western world, if for the would-be mother, they are not ready to give paid leave because they believe that is going to affect the profitability of the company. So no, and I think once we are going to talk about the equality in terms of economy, in this way, they are going to discourage. And that's why you see that in the Western world, they are facing a severe disbalance in their population. In most of the country, the growth is negative. So all these things are very, very sensitive. Seeing the things in the extreme binary, that is the biggest problem. And I will thank, first of all, I will thank to all of you, and I will try to define gender equality, and I have taken this definition from somewhere, but before mentioning the source, I will just try to define that what is the meaning of gender equality. जैसे चने की एक दाल होती है, उसके ऊपर एक कोटिंग होती है. बाहर से जब आप देखो तो वो दाल एक दिखती है, पर अगर उस कोट को आप निकालो तो वो दो होती है. दोनों एक दूसरे से जुड़े हैं, ना कोई बड़ा है ना कोई छोटा है, और जैसे ही उसमें से कोई अपने आप को बड़ा करने की कोशिश करेगा ना, उस दाल का अस्तित्व समाप्त हो जाता है. This is the meaning of gender equality, and this definition of gender equality is given in Rig Veda. So I have never seen such a beautiful definition of gender equality in any text, and I think this is the best way to respect each other, to respect each other's dignity, to respect each other's value. And in this way only we can create a justiciable society. And this is the true trace of the spirit of the feminism. With this, I will request to close this session. And once again, I am very much grateful to Vikramjit Banerjee sir, Seenu Joseph ma'am, and Zakia Suman ma'am for being here today on Sunday evening, because most of us want to spend this time with our family. But I'm extremely thankful to all of you, and all above, it was a brilliant session, and I think there was so much takeaway for each of us. from this program. So thank you. Thanks to all of you.